A lot of my criticisms of the first game completely still apply here, especially in regard to the difficulty, and somehow they made it even more frustrating. This game took me longer to beat too, and I'm not entirely sure why. Well, I guess there's just more to play. If in the last game I said you absolutely had to use save states to get through most of it, I'm leaning towards saying that you have to use the rewind feature to get through this one. As a matter of fact, I think this one is so difficult it almost is worth skipping, but if you're planning on doing a run through of these games for the sake of experiencing them like I am, rather than testing your might against them, I'd say it's still worth it as long as you use every modern day emulation crutch imaginable. I didn't really go through it in the previous video, but there have been fan-made ROM hacks for these Star Wars games that simplify the experience a bit. 100%, if you can get your hands on those, I would say you should absolutely do so. But honestly, even with all of that, you might still need to take advantage of the save states and rewind features. At the very least, the visuals are still a treat, the music is still breathtaking, the sparkling 16-bit Star Wars experience is still very much there, and most importantly, the bad guys still explode when you defeat them like they were ripped out of a Michael Bay movie. I wanted to get all of that out of the way before I got to the more formal and thought out portion of this retrospective, because in case somebody clicks away quickly, I wanted them to make sure they heard me once again complain about how hard a retro game is, because that's apparently all I'm good for these days. But anyway, here we go. Super Star Wars: The Empire Strikes Back. Released in 1993 for the Super Nintendo, Super Star Wars: The Empire Strikes Back is the sequel to the highly acclaimed Super Star Wars. Developed and published once again by LucasArts and JVC, this side-scrolling action game is based on the 1980 film The Empire Strikes Back, the second installment of the original Star Wars trilogy. Building upon the foundation laid by its predecessor, the game sought to deliver an equally thrilling and challenging experience, reflecting the darker and more complex narrative of the film. In this retrospective, I hope to delve into the historical context, development process, gameplay mechanics, reception, and the lasting impact of Super Star Wars: The Empire Strikes Back. The early 1990s was a vibrant period for video games, and was marked by the competition between 8-bit and 16-bit consoles. The Super Nintendo was at the forefront of this technological shift, offering advanced graphics and sound capabilities that allowed developers to create more immersive experiences. The success of the previous Super Star Wars, released a year prior, demonstrated the potential for licensed games to capture the essence of the source material and appeal to both fans and gamers. LucasArts, known for its innovation in game design and its successful adaptation of the original Star Wars film into a video game, was well positioned to continue its exploration of the Star Wars universe. With The Empire Strikes Back, the challenge was to build on the success of its predecessor, while capturing the essence of the film, which was known for its darker undertone and more complex storyline. The development team faced several challenges though, including translating the expansive and varied environments of the film into a side-scrolling format. They needed to create levels that not only reflected the film's iconic scenes, but also provided engaging gameplay. The team also aimed to improve upon the original game's mechanics and address some of the criticisms related to difficulty and controls, which I would say they were off the mark on. The Empire Strikes Back retained the side-scrolling action platformer style of its predecessor, but introduced several new elements and improvements. The game allowed players to control Luke, Han, and Chewbacca, once again each with unique abilities and weapons that reflected their roles in the film. The gameplay was divided into levels that mirrored the key scenes from the film. Players started on the icy planet of Hoth, fought through the treacherous swamps of Dagobah, and navigated the dangerous confines of Cloud City. Luke Skywalker, as in the previous game, could wield a lightsaber and use the Force. New abilities included a grappling hook and improved Force powers, which were crucial for navigating certain levels and defeating specific enemies. Han continued to use his blasters, and his agility was enhanced with new abilities like rolling and dashing, which allowed him to evade enemies and navigate tricky platforming sections. Chewbacca, known for his strength, could use a bowcaster and had increased health. His brute force was particularly effective against larger enemies and obstacles. The game's opening level on Hoth featured snowy landscapes and the iconic AT&T walkers. The level was designed to reflect the film's epic battle scenes, with large-scale enemy encounters and challenging terrain. The swampy Dagobah presented a different set of challenges, with environmental hazards and puzzles that required the use of Force powers and platforming skills. The final levels of Cloud City took place in a floating city with tight corridors and high platformings that tested the player's precision and timing. The Empire Strikes Back continued to push the graphical capabilities of the SNES. The game featured detailed sprites and backgrounds that effectively captured the atmosphere of the film. The snowy landscapes of Hoth and the misty swamps of Dagobah were rendered with impressive visual fidelity. The soundtrack included a rendition of John Williams' iconic score, enhancing the immersive experience. The sound effects, including blaster fire and lightsaber clashes, added to the game's authenticity and excitement. When it released, The Empire Strikes Back received a positive reception from both critics and players alike. It was praised for its improved gameplay mechanics and its faithful adaptation of the film. However, just like its predecessor, the game faced some immense criticism for its difficulty and certain design choices. But the critics appreciated the game's graphical improvements and its ability to capture the essence of the film. The attention to detail in the level design and the inclusion of memorable scenes from the movie were highlighted as strengths. The addition of new abilities and characters provided a fresh experience compared to the original game. The playable characters and their unique abilities added depth and variety to the game. But the difficulty was still a common point of criticism. Some players found certain levels to be excessively challenging, particularly due to the respawning of enemies and limited continues. Control issues also existed, with some reviewers noting that the game's platforming sections could be frustrating due to imprecise controls and awkward hit detection. Despite all of that, it was still commercially successful, continuing the momentum generated by its predecessor. It sold well and was a popular title in the SNES library. The game's success contributed to the growing popularity of Star Wars games and demonstrated the potential for licensed games to achieve both critical and commercial success. And with that, played a significant role in the evolution of the Star Wars video games. It built upon the foundation established by the previous game, and set a precedent for future adaptations of the franchise. The success paved the way for subsequent Star Wars titles and demonstrated that licensed games could effectively capture the essence of their source material. There were some difficulty in design choices, and that's despite the challenge and controversy due to the game's difficulty. And as it always goes, some players appreciated the challenge and others found it to be a barrier to enjoyment. And the difficulty was once again exacerbated by the lack of checkpoints, and the frequent respawning of enemies, which made progression through certain levels particularly arduous. And despite the improvements in the graphics and sound, the game was not without technical limitations. Since the game was still on the SNES, it still had its constraints, and some players experienced issues with slowdown and graphical glitches. But the game holds a special place in the hearts of many retro gamers, and Star Wars fans for that matter. Its nostalgic value is significant, as it represents a time when video games were evolving rapidly, and the Star Wars franchise was expanding its reach. Its influence can be seen in its impact on the subsequent Star Wars games. Like I said, it demonstrated that licensed gaming could be both commercially successful and well received by fans. The game's success also contributed to the growth of Star Wars gaming franchise and set a standard for future adaptations. It led to the development of Super Star Wars Return of the Jedi, which completed the trilogy of adaptations for the original Star Wars films. The game's design and mechanics influenced the development of these sequels and helped establish a template for future Star Wars games. Today, the game is remembered fondly by fans of retro gaming and Star Wars. Look, in conclusion, despite being ridiculously difficult, the game stands as a noteworthy entry in the history of video games, particularly within the context of licensed adaptations. Its blend of action, platforming, and cinematic elements captured the spirit of the film, while building upon the success of its predecessor. The game's improvements in gameplay mechanics, graphics, and sound demonstrated the developer's commitment to enhancing the gaming experience. I am of the opinion that the game's impact extends beyond its era. It represents a snapshot of gaming history, a tribute to the beloved Star Wars franchise, and a reminder of the exciting possibilities that arise when innovation meets passion. The game's legacy continues to resonate with fans and serves as a testament to the enduring appeal of Star Wars universe in interactive entertainment. But with that, I'll be going over the third game next week. So I'll see you then. As always, thanks for watching. Dean out.